Do we really need all the electronics, all the bells and whistles to run our model railways? Let's talk about it. Of recent times, I've spent a ton of time experimenting with different electronics to help the modeler to understand what can be done even on a modest budget and someone with limited knowledge. You've probably all heard it, some modelers say, but isn't DCC only meant to be 2 wires? Well, for a basic setup, yep, you're exactly right, that is correct. However, it really depends on how far and what level of automation you wish to have on your model railway. Yes, there's a steep learning curve and you need to want to learn the DCC. That's probably one of the beauties of model railroading. There's just different aspects to this great hobby of ours. Make sure you stay around to the end and I'll show you some little techniques on how I break down the circuits to be more manageable so they're easier to understand and easier to wire and ultimately easier to fault find. So let's talk about hardware. So I'm not talking about the type of hardware, hammers and nails type of hardware, but the electrical components that you're going to need to run your automation on your model railway. I'll be grouping these into 4 main areas. Number 1 is obviously the DCC Command Station. Number 2, I'm going to call the Occupancy track detection modules. And then number 3 is the stationary decoders. So number 4, I'm going to call personal computer or PC and also software. So number 1, DCC Command Stations. Now, there's a myriad of command stations out there that are more than adequate to do what you want to do. Just things you need to be mindful of is depending on, so if you're going to run automation with control software, what is going to be compatible. So these guys are the brains behind the operation. So they're in charge of broadcasting and receiving messages to and from locomotives, the occupancy detection, and also the stationary decoders and the other hardware that you might need for your setup. DCC Command Station, so there's 2 primary outputs, or outputs and an input. So we've got the DCC signal, or what we're going to call the track power or the track bus, 2 wires that will go to the track effectively, and also the communication ports. So the ones I use are LocoNet and S88. There's a myriad of other ones that are out there, so obviously you need to be au fait with whatever command station you're using and the communication bus that you are deciding to go with. And these guys, this communication bus actually plugs into your stationary decoders and also your track occupancy detection units. Number 2 is track occupancy. Track occupancy is where the train is detected on a given track. On my fallen log railway, that's done by current detecting type units. So that's the pickup of locomotives, some either lit coaches, and if you've got freight stock that has got certain value resistors across the wheel set, that'll also fire off the occupancy detection. Or, as I've explained in previous videos, if you want real finite, exact positioning of where a locomotive or something on your model railway, you can use optical sensors or infrared sensors to do that. So what we'll do, we'll dive just a little bit deeper into occupancy detection, and in particular within train controller. So without knowing where the train is at a given time or what block it's occupying, train automation is quite difficult. So as I touched on very briefly before, a little bit beyond the scope of this video is if we want to get into exact detection, exactly where trains are at a given block or position within a piece of track, that's obviously done by infrared and, as I said, optical sensors. And I'll will a link to my previous video on that. So what I'll do now, I'll just quickly go across to my layout file within train controller, and I'll show you how I set up where my blocks are and some of the justifications and how you enter the addresses into train controller to fire off the block occupancy. So what I've got here is a schematic or a track diagram of the fallen log railway. So the bit we're going to be looking at predominantly is this bit right up the top corner here, which has got BY, so that's my Belair yard. We're over on the fallen log railway switchboard with the train controller. So this is my main sort of yard area, which I'm calling Belair yard. So we're just going to concentrate on this sort of area here right now. So to the left of the screen is my eastbound, to the right of the screen is westbound. So if I start talking east and west, that's the orientation. So you'll see this block here that has BY1 written on it. So that's an arrival track from trains coming from the west. All the trains that will be coming from the west are going to come from, you can see this track here. They'll trundle in via this switch, BY in, and then they'll make their way into BY1. So when it comes to setting up the automation side of things, there's a few things we need to look at. So train controller likes having blocks between sets of points effectively. So I know this can be a bit of a contentious issue with some users. However, this is the way I've done it and it works for me. So what I mean by that is, so we need some block occupancy here on this. You can't actually see it because it's a locomotive. This is called BY, what I call BY up track, and BY in. So BY is Belair Yard, so that's the inbound track. So obviously we've gone through a point, so it needs to know from BY up to BY in that we've actually got some occupancy, so the system or the computer program can start tracking the train. So you can see from here, the train can go in various different directions. It can either end up on BY3 or BY1. So BY2 is an eastbound arrival track. So we've actually locked these points out, so it can't actually go to BY2. So the system now needs to know where it is. So if we've got the point set to BY1, which is what we'll run a train there in a sec, we'll run a train just here on train control, and I'll show you how the simulator works. But you need some block occupancy there. So now I'll just go into now what we call the block editor. So don't be too concerned about all these little arrows and all that there. So that's some other details within train control that's sort of beyond the scope of this. But ultimately, this block has 2 detection units. So one for one half and one for what I call the braking area, or where the train's going to stop. So, but when you look at the diagram like such, it's just going to show the whole block occupied with a color like a pinky color. And I'll show you that just quickly. So it goes a pinky color like that, as you can see. So within the test environment, I can actually turn my occupancy detection on and off within the system, but that's for another day. So it just shows up. So it's not going to actually show which occupied section it's in. It's just going to show that the train is in that given block, because that's all we need to know. So it's got 2 separate addresses. So this is for my Z21, the LocoNet side of things. So address 73, your own addressing or numbering scheme. So I'll leave that up to you to work out. For just a word of note here, so once you start going into a myriad of blocks, can I suggest one very important thing? Label all your cables, even if it's just from the track end, and also what occupancy detection module it's going into, and then have some sort of what I would call some sort of database or something similar. How you're going to keep hold of all those. So I'll just show you mine very quickly. So this is on Excel. So I actually just print these out and I actually write them. I've got a folder and I'm a bit old school in that regards. So all you would have the block number. So on this particular block we're referring to 4 is BY1, which is the inbound block. And then what the pin number is what physical pin. So my DigiKais have 8 pins on them, and I'll give it what pin it is, then what LocoNet address it is, so the 77, 73 and 77 on the other one, and also the description. So I'll have a description of where it is. So BY1, it's quite self-explanatory on this. This is a very, very quick overview on how we're putting blocks into it. So there's a myriad of ways that we can look at doing it, but ultimately you gotta pre-plan and think, how am I going to track the train? So for train controller, iTrain might be different. They might like you tracking the point work as well. Train controller doesn't need that. So number 3 is what I'm going to call stationary decoders. So what does stationary decoders do? They control your turnouts or your points depending on which part of the world you're in, and they might take form of a solenoid, a servo motor, or an actual like a tortoise type motor. Stationary decoders may also, if you're into your signaling system, that's what you'll use to control those, but that's definitely not going to be something that's brought up in this video. So just as we spoke about before with block occupancy, the turnouts, if you decide to go down that route, is very, very similar. So they've got technically an address as well. So they're from the DCC world. So what I'll do is just show you this one here. So this is into the where we put the justifications for it. So within train controller, and I'm assuming iTrain is the same, and I know JMRI, this is very similar interface as well. You can actually label the name of it, how you see it within train controller. And then the big one is the connection. So mine is via the Roku Z21, and then that's where you find your address. So this is obviously from these are LDT units, which are German, the Fitzgear Datum Technica or something similar to that, I think they are. And they run my Tortoise motors, and also got some Cobalt motors, point motors as well. So this particular one is address 119, and it's just a matter of putting that in. And once you justify that, it'll have that address as 119. So when you set up your schedules, as I spoke to them before, point A to point B, you can control the points via the scheduling or automatically. So number 4, I'm going to call personal computer or PC, and also software. So I won't go too much into the PC side of things, because that you could use a myriad of PCs. So my understanding, most of the programs out there don't really need a large capacity type computer. What I mean, that they're not all that RAM hungry, and they don't take much processing power to run them. There's a few main players when it comes to programs on the market. As I've already stated, I use Train Controller Gold version 9. Also there is iTrain, which is a bit more the new kid on the block, and also there's JMRI. So I have used a little bit of JMRI before, and for the average modeler, if you're so tech savvy, which I'm sort of not regarding that side of things, there is a little more work to that. I have been told I'm not a well-used iTrain user. However, if you're into prototype signaling, the signaling within iTrain is second to none. So there is a cost for train control on there. It is quite an expensive program now. I've been running for the last 10 years or so. However, it's exponentially gone up in price. iTrain, my understanding, is a lot more cost effective. So, and also JMRI is a freeware program. So wherever you might fall in that continuum on exactly how much you wish to spend, do your research to see what features you're after before you go out and spend your money. Just while we're on PCs, just one thing more. I use about 6 PCs on my Fallen Log Railway. So I've got a little patch system, or sorry, a little piece of software on Train Controller called Smart Hand. So what that allows me to do is I can use a very, very old PC, and some of mine are 10, 15 years old. They run on a wireless network, and they hook up with the main computer running your software. And what you can actually do, you can replicate your switchboards or your control panels and control all your points and switches, and also start and stop some automation and scheduling. So on my Fallen Log Railway, I've probably got no less than 130 to 140 insulated block sections that are all detected via train controller. So you must be thinking, how do you actually go and wire that? And that's just too overwhelming for anyone like the average modeler. I consider myself a very average modeler. However, the tips and techniques I'm about to show you very, very quickly will help you keep track of the wires and just methodically go through a wire at a time effectively, and show you how I did it on the Fallen Log Railway. Before we do that, we'll just quickly go over to my sponsor PCBWay and have a quick message from them. This video is proudly sponsored by PCBWay.com. If you're a tinkerer, inventor, or an advanced electrical engineer, PCBWay have you covered. Or you are seriously missing out, or passionate about PCBs, but PCBWay do not stop there. They also offer 3D print, injection molding or CNC machining, assembly or basic PCB manufacturing. They can do it all for a very competitive price. Check out their awesome services in the link below, and also a special offer to anyone who supports my channel. Alright, so if you follow this next little segment that I'm going to show you, that I was taught by another modeler, to simplify the wiring, a circuit and a wire at a time, it's going to make your life so much easier, and you'll begin to understand exactly what all this automation is about. And if you do apply these little tips and tricks, it's actually, the wiring's not really all that difficult if you follow these principles. So let's have a quick look at, now, many thanks to the team at Decoders. I reached out to them a few videos ago to use some of their pictures and the like. So this is off their website. So it's a very good graphical illustration on how we're going to wire your detection units, so your occupancy detection units, for any automation. So we'll start with the DR5000. So the DR5000 is obviously what we're looking at, the DCC Command Station. So the first thing we'll look at is the track output. So now we're going to go away from the track output, just two wires, just going, both wires going to a given rail on, say, your looper track. So now we're going to start adding the detection units, as shown here, the DR4088LN, which is the LocoNet version. So you'll see that, so we're going to say the red, which is, so we're going to say the common wire. You can see at the top there, I'll just blow that up for you. You see that at the top, that cable there, or sorry, that cable there, the track has no breaks in it. So that's a continuous track. So depending on which way you want to wire it, I'm a red and blue dropper wire. So all my little droppers that come off my track are red and blue. So my blues are always to the back. And an easy way to work that out when the track starts turning around and it starts getting very, very confusing is just get an old wagon with a colored texture with red on the front, and as I do blue on the back, and I'll just follow that wagon around when I'm doing my wiring, so I know I get my droppers in the right orientation, because if you don't do that, you'll get short circuits. Now you'll see this front one, this is where the blocks start getting divided up. So you can see there, we've now got some sort of break in the track. So when a train is to come in, say from this left-hand side, it'll occupy this track, but none of these here will be occupied. But when we start driving a train, say from left to right, each time the current sensing picks up a train or a locomotive or lit coaches, it'll start firing these off. Now let's have a look a little bit closer to we'll go to the communication bus first. So the communication bus here for the DR5000, we got two of them. So you got LocoNet T and LocoNet B. So we won't go too much the differences in it, but for this example, we're using LocoNet T because LocoNet B you'll use for boosters. That's for another video. So you'll see that, we'll follow that line up. That'll go to the first in the series of the the DR4088 LocoNet, and then you daisy chain them along. That's how you connect them all up. Now I won't go into the addressing of these because that's going to be very specific to the type of module you have. So just follow the user guide on how you might do that. So now we've got the communication bus sorted. So now what we can see, we'll go back to the track output on what I'm going to call the insulated rail side, which is this orange line. So you can see we've got the track output, which is the DCC output, coming to each one of what they call the common here, the C of the 4088. You can see that there. And then that is just daisy chained along to all the other modules that you might have in that given area. So once you've worked out where your brakes in the track are going to be, it's just a matter of then going to your module and then wiring in a block, and what I'm going to call an isolated block at a time. So then what I'll do, I'll then go and test that block, that it's firing off properly. So in this case, we've got pin number 5, and that might be address 74 like I showed you in the example before when I showed you my block occupancy. So then you'll go and test that. Then what I'll do after that, I'll then go and write it down on my little spreadsheet. So I know that pin number 5 on, let's say, module number 1, which is this first one, works correctly. So then I'll go on to the next block, and then the next block, and the next block, and so forth and so forth. So just to let you know, so there's no confusion here, this diagram showing that you can just daisy chain these together. So one of these modules doesn't only control one block. The 4088 LocoNet version will control or detect 16 blocks. So we've got seven isolated blocks here. You would use this first bank on the left, which is you'd use the first 7 pins on that detector. So then you go up to the 16 and you do module number 2, number 3, and number 4, and so on. This is just showing how you daisy chain the communication bus. And then if you've got more modules that you need, so if you've got more detector blocks than 64, which is what is represented here, you buy another one, and then you use a LocoNet cable, and then you plug it in just like this. So this will go to the LocoNet, to the next one, and so forth. So I do have a video, I'll put the link below, regarding how to make LocoNet cables. So as I said earlier in this little piece, now this is just obviously for a more simplified version that's not going to use boosters. So boosters, all the boosters are going to do, it's going to sit between these cables here and the input there. That's pretty well all it does. And then we can look at circuit breakers and the like. That's just adding another circuit to it. So it's just a matter of, when you're wiring it, just keep it very simple to start with. Just simplify it right down to a wire at a time. Test that wire to make sure it's working properly. Make sure it's firing off properly within your whatever automation software you're looking at, and go from so forth to so forth. So the beauty of also, and I've showed in previous videos, the DR5000, if you are to test this, if you are to go into the LocoNet, so this is the DCC interface for the LocoNet on my computer in my office. Now, if I'm to go and click on this, I can actually look at the feedback modules. So they're not normally all red because I've actually got it off. But if you've got it turned on, and say this block here that you're looking at, number 5 is testing, you'd come up and you'd go, this one here would have a tick in it and it'd turn red. And then you'd do number 6, go along, test it, make sure it's working. And as you can see, you can go up to literally thousands, 2,000 blocks. And if you're going up to 2,000 blocks, I'd love to see your layout, because it's going to be an absolute monster of a layout. So that's how you do the testing. Break it down, makes it a lot easier, so you don't go and do, then once you get a little bit of confidence to the wiring, I'd probably wire maybe 8 blocks at a time. And then I'd go back and test the 8 blocks and fill out my information so I know where all the blocks are, what pin goes to where and what track, and so forth. We'll just quickly go over to the layout, and you can see the footage there going of just about to start the schedule on the inbound train. So this is where I'm just showing you very, very quickly how this all integrates. So you've seen the signal go to a green signal there. It trundles itself down, and it resets the signal once the train's gone through. Now, I've sort of breezed over the stationary decoders a little bit, because ultimately they're just controlling either the servo motors or your points and your turnouts, and also your signaling. So I've given a little more time to showing you the occupancy detection thing, because that probably for automation is a little bit more important if you want to get out starting and get into this side of the hobby. So what we're doing there, we're crawling into a crawl speed up to infrared detectors there, and you'll see the train's going to stop almost perfectly in between as soon as that beam's broken. So automation in its most basic forms needs at least, obviously, your DCC Command Station, some sort of way of detecting whether your block's occupied or not, block occupancy, and in my case, a PC. Now, also desirable if you want to get into a higher level of automation is obviously have the stationary decoders to control your points. However, you can sort of get around doing that, but then it sort of becomes a more semi-automatic system, not so much of an automated or automatic system. So you might be asking, why would you want to go to all the bother and expense to go down this rabbit hole? So my reasoning is I have quite a large layout that I run, and often because of my locality where I live, I don't have the pool of operators to come out and help me run my layout. I like to run semi-prototypical type operations on my fallen log railway. So the operations I have set up are quite important to how I run my layout. So effectively, the automation gives me up to 3 or 4 more operators with just a simple click of a button from the dispatcher, which does a myriad of train movements in the background. So I'll just quickly run you through train controller and iTrain, and Game or I are probably very similar. They might call them different things. So Within Train Controller, we use things called schedules. So a schedule is running from a train from point A to B, B to C, and so on. So what automation allows me to do during an operation session if I've only got a few operators. So if I've only got 3 operators, I'll have some operators that'll run at least 2 of my shunting areas or my destinations where all the industries are. So what I can do from my main yard is I can send a train out that's gonna go out automatically via Train Controller, transverse through the layout and end up to the location it needs to be out, and it'll stop itself. Then the local operator will take over the control of that train, shunt it out, and once they've shunted out, picked up the wagons they need picking up and dropping off to the drop-offs, they'll be able to send that locomotive or that train back to the yard, all under automatic control. So automatic control on my layout controls all the signaling, sets all the points and locks all the routes. So what that actually does is sets up a collision avoidance system. So if we've got other trains that are coming or due to be coming across each other, we won't have any collisions, and that's obviously quite a powerful part of these types of programs. That's the end of this video, so thanks for watching. A few takeaways from this video on, this is sort of just dipping our toe into the water regarding automation. We could go a lot further than this. I personally like the automation side of things because of the flexibility it gives me to run my layout, particularly during operating sessions if I don't have the number of operators. So there's a few questions that I would like you to ask, and if you could comment below, I'd be very interested to get the conversation going. So the first question is, would you implement a system like this of automation or try to tweak it something a little bit different to suit your needs? Number 2, how would you think you might customize this system to better suit your needs? And number 3, I always like to ask is, if you run the system similar to this, how do you tweak it, or how do you think I might be able to do this better to get better outcome for my model railway? So don't forget to subscribe, click that little bell icon to let YouTube know this is a good video. Also, if we could subscribe, it also lets the algorithm churn over to let YouTube also know that might be some videos that people might want to watch in the future. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.